I'm not sure Timothy Gordon could be embarrassed, but we're going to do our best to expose this new paganism where we have secondary ends over primary. It's just the NFP overturning all, and Timothy Gordon is a proponent of it. I'm not even sure he's aware, but we're going to bring the receipts why this is all wrong and bring in Christian Wagner to kind of finish off our series. These guys have got to have unity, number one, bring everyone closer to the heart. You know what I'm saying? I'm John Farrell, your NFP spiritual dictator. This is Annulment Proof.
Closer to the heart. Yes, closer to the heart. Philosophers and plowmen, each must know his part. So a new mentality, closer to the heart. Yes, closer to the heart.
I love it. I'm telling you, these guys are all about getting people to feel closer. You know, it's the main thing you hear about all the time with, Scott Hahn and all the body people. I called Timothy Gordon. I didn't call him. I've been emailing him for, a few years now. And I emailed, you know what? For the first time ever, though, he looked at my email. I have an email tracker. So I said, hey, Timothy Gordon, look at what you're doing with Joe Heschmeyer. You know, you keep asking him to come on the show and rebut and stuff like that. And so I said, I'm going to do the same thing. So Tim definitely got the message, but he doesn't want to talk. And so I'm not really big on, I'm just giving him a taste of his own medicine because he likes to. I just copied his whole thumbnail. Let me look at that thumbnail for a second. I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about. I thought it was so funny because there's Joe Heschmeyer and they made him look perfect, just like the line. So I did the same thing with Timothy Gordon. Anyway, let's go and listen to, we'll finish the rest of his video and respond to it. I got some new info about 1 Corinthians 7:6, which is there's all these new wrinkles to this story. You guys got to hang on. Hang on. Let's see. Now let's listen.
Next comment. Yeah, I think you're right when it comes to the definitions of NFP, that Connor Patrick said that.
It doesn't correspond with actions. And for Catholic moral philosophy and moral theology, we have to make our terms correspond with actions. NFP just corresponds with knowledge. When just having illicit sex with your wife, on a day where she's most fertile, medium fertile, less fertile, that's not that doesn't affect the morality of the act, and the church has taught the opposite. So
in a way, he's right. It doesn't affect the morality of the act, no matter the sacred penitentiary last, in the 1800s you don't have to be pursuing procreation. So whether you don't have to shoot for those fertile days, that's the point. Okay, that's correct.
Church is with me.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Be the Patriarch says, good. Let's throw out the term NFP.
NFP is a propaganda term. It's called calendar contraception. That is what it is. Everybody knows it. If you go on any secular website, they'll all say this is it's a form of contraception. It's natural family planning. It's just a euphemism. That's all it is. It's like gender affirming surgery. You're hacking yourself up and you can't. It's crazy. That's all you're doing. Family planning. Anytime you're trying to do something evil, you got to have a euphemism. Otherwise, they wouldn't use those.
I don't ever use it.
Yeah, that's a lot of people ask us about NFP, and we're always just like, we don't really know. It's kind of an odd, like the whole thing. We're always just like, yeah, we don't.
Well, it's people that don't understand moral philosophy trying to reason about moral philosophy. That's all it is.
Interesting.
So I guess I'm closer to the fruitcakes like Christopher West, slightly closer to Christopher West than the LARPs who say like it's wrong to have sex with your wife.
The LARPs. Okay, so he's trying to say that there are times when it's not good or whatever. It can be sinful, and I'll show you that in the show, in the notes, man. Like we got saints explaining why this can be sinful, and you got to be careful with it because procreation is primary. Before the fall, Adam and Eve were the way they were supposed to reproduce was going to be basically with a thought of love. That was revealed to, I think, St. Bridget. That's it. Just boom. That's how they were going to reproduce. Okay. And then there would be no labor pains and That's how it was. But because of the fall, it can only be justified because this is kind of. You have to be careful how you explain it, but it can only be justified through procreative intent.
I guess I'm slightly closer to him, but I'm not one of these guys. I'm not a theology of the body guy. They tend to be the same. I'm like that.
Well, okay, you might not act like a theology of the body guy, but it's all if you say the conjugal act must be unitive, you are a theology of the body guy. You are. That's part of the new paganism where the default is now just doing the act. In other words, it's all about as long as you are doing the act, it's fine. Whereas the Christian default is it must be oriented toward procreation, or the Christian default is the best is continence. Okay, this is the best. So we have this whole theology of the body and all these things that came out in the 20th century is all about changing what is the best, and that's why they have all this stuff. We may have to make unity in essential, which in other words, it's just like, okay, then the act is now the new primary purpose, not the procreation.
That's creepy. That's weird. It's just you're allowed to have sex with your wife on any day of the month. You can,
except during menses, you're not allowed to, or the wife is not allowed to request the debt. And yeah, any day of the month, it's fine. That's right. So calendar contraception restricts. You're not allowed to restrict the good, the primary good, which is procreation. You're not allowed to restrict it, but that's what they do. They say, nope, we're not going to use this part of this day.
pick when. It's not wrong to not have it. It's not wrong to have it. As long as it's procreative and marital, as long as you're married, it's procreative and it's unitive. As long as I get
there, he said it again, the unitive part. That's why I say open to life is really close to life, because you're not pursuing procreation. You're trying to not get pregnant. Okay. We'll go to the show notes here in a bit and to get some more of the receipts, what we're talking about.
It wouldn't be unitive if you're raping your wife or something,
Well, that sounds like a juicy comment, doesn't it? That's a good idea. This is our chance to go to the show notes and talk about rape. What do you think? Hold on. All right, let's bring a little St. Thomas Aquinas. On the contrary, he says, rape is unlawful sexual intercourse. All right. But this pertains to the sin of lust. Therefore, rape is a species of lust. Okay, so then he continues. People are talking about rape and stuff. He continues. The man who is just married has, in virtue of his betrothal, that means trust, virtue of his betrothal, a certain right in her. Wherefore he sins by using violence, but he is not guilty of the crime of rape. Write that down, everybody. Let me give you a little history here, okay? You can be violent towards your wife. You can sin against your wife. You can do all kinds of, everyone, but it's not the crime of rape, because of the object of consent is the right over the body. It has nothing to do with unity or feeling good or mutual agreement or any of that. That's not in the contract, which is why the concept of marital rape was non-existent until recent history. All right. And how can I prove that? Look at this. In 1993, marital rape was outlawed in all 50 states. Why did it take until 1993? Because rape was always not allowed, okay? And, murder, all that kind of stuff, not allowed in this country. In a lot of countries even before this, not allowed. Marital rape, though, didn't exist until 1993, because once the Pope started to say marital rape was a reality because of something called required unity, which Timothy Gordon is into, okay? That changed the definition of consent to one of perpetual consent rather than a one-time. That's all unity means. It means you have no marital debt. That's all it means. This is why Timothy Gordon, he's a feminist. He doesn't know it. He's embarrassing himself and he doesn't know it. And that's why I would need him to talk to me or interact in some way so I can show him some of this stuff. He's busy with other things, but it eventually push will come to shove, I suppose. Okay, prior to this development, many rape statutes only considered forced intercourse to be rape when the perpetrator was male and survival was blah, blah, blah. The marital rape exception was therefore rooted in the idea of consent, contract. Okay, The marital rape exception was therefore rooted in the idea that consent is a contractual relationship a woman enters when she marries a man. That's right. The marital rape exception. Therefore, there was no marital rape because consent was a contractual relationship. What do we call it now? A covenant of love. It's not contractual. And just ask Father Mike Schmitz. He'll tell you in a very excited way that it's not a contract. Nope. It's always marriage. It's a contract, okay? So, yes, bad things can happen between spouses, but rape is not one of them. You just can't do it. It's kind of like you can't commit adultery with your own wife, your own spouse. You can't do it. It's not possible because they're, duh. Okay? It's strict definition of adultery, that is. All right, so we got ahead of ourselves a little bit on this, so we're going to go back. I got to tell you this is amazing stuff I got from Cornelius a Lapide. Like I said, there's new wrinkles here. We're going to have to do a whole other video just on this topic, but we're going to skim over it in a minute. All right. Okay, so there, we started this video right here with this. Now, 1 Corinthians 7, the wife hath not power over her body, but the husband. I believe this is, okay, hang on. Defraud not one another, except perhaps by consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to prayer and return again together, lest Satan tempt you for your incontinency. Okay, so they're saying that if you have to come together, it's not for procreation, but for secondary ends. Okay. In other words, be careful, because he won't Satan to tempt you to cheat on your spouse. That would be a legitimate thing to not do, but also for the incontinency. So you're weak, and that might be a problem. But I speak this by indulgence. What this means, and not command, what that means, and I never knew this till I read the biblical commentary from Cornelius a Lapide, who is the man, all right? And he brings in Aquinas and Augustine on it to back it up. What that means is the indulgence is legally allowed in marriage, but it is venial sinful. So your remedy of concupiscence, it's there for you, but that's a venial sin to pursue marriage only for a remedy of concupiscence. That would be in menopause or during pregnancy. For I would that all men were as myself. All right, here's, like I said at the beginning, the default for Christian marriage is continence. That is the default. Not we're going to pump up the unity and the closer to the heart as much as possible. And that's what Timothy Gordon keeps. That's where he's at. Even though he says he's not Christopher West, he's just a different flavor of Christopher West. He can't get away from it because he keeps saying unity. Let's see. But everyone hath his proper gift from God, one in this matter and another that. That's right. Some people get married, some people don't. Okay? But the best is continence. We're going to be continent in heaven. I'm going to get to that later in the video, but we got to start now, okay? But Christopher West, and I've said this before, Father Mike Schmitz, and everyone at Ascension Press, they keep repeating this fake quote that the more conjugal acts you have, the holier you get. There's more grace. That's from St. Thomas Aquinas. Nope, never said it. It's not there. It doesn't exist. These guys are, like I said, it's the new paganism, the new order. St. Augustine, a Christian may therefore live in concord with his wife, whether with providing for a fleshly craving, a thing which the apostle speaks by permission. Got that, guys? Okay, so it is permitted, but it's not without sin. Just because it's permitted, it's excusable. I'm going to point out why in a minute. Not by commandment or providing for the procreation of children, which may be at present some degree praiseworthy. See that? So you have to excuse your conjugal act with procreation. And it's some degree praiseworthy, okay? So he's not like cheering it on. He's like, hey, this whole thing is like fornication is evil unless it's done in marriage for procreation or providing for brotherly, sisterly fellowship. So there's the unity part right there. But that has nothing to do with without any corporal connection. Okay, hear that? The conjugal act doesn't have to be, the conjugal act has nothing to do with unity, brotherly, sisterly fellowship without any connection. Having his wife as though he had her not, which is what the Bible says. Pretend you don't have a wife, husbands, and then wives act as though you have no husband. It as is most excellent and sublime in the marriage of Christians. Okay. Instead of all this, pump up the love, pump up the unity, pump up the closeness of the heart. Get everyone closer to the heart. Okay. Yet so in her, he hates the name of temporal relationship and loves the hope of everlasting blessedness. Wow. That doesn't sound very theology of the body to me at all. Okay, so let's keep going. We're on this note. 1 Corinthians 7, Cornelius a Lapide, the great, I think he was around in the 1600s, biblical commentary. The guy's the man. So what does he say about 1 Corinthians 7:6 about this? I speak of this by way of indulgence, all right? And come together again. That's part of the Bible quote I just gave you. From this, Peter Martyr and the Magdeburgians, those are bad guys. These are Protestants, these dudes right here, conclude that it is not lawful for married persons to vow perpetual continence by mutual consent. All right? And the reason why all Protestants think that is because they say that marriage is you have to get married or you have to produce kids, so you cannot vow perpetual continence because marriage is about having babies. It's about this is the new paganism where they brought it in. It's like you got to do the thing. No, you do not. It's actually, like I say, not the default for Christian marriage, but today, the theology of the body, Timothy Gordon, Christians are saying, no, it is the default. Like he says, more power to the act, okay? But the answer to this is the apostle, Paul, is not prescribing but permitting the marriage act. Verse 6, but I speak by permission and not commandment. This means it's an allowance for the weakness of concupiscence, but it is not the command to do it for procreation, all right? That's the only way you're free of sin, as St. Thomas Aquinas reminds us, when you're trying to procreate. But if you are trying to avoid concupiscence, lest Satan tempt you, you're allowed, but it is venial sin. So it's not cool. Don't do that. but hey, some people just can't hang. So it's better than going and getting the prostitute, all right? That's why this is an allowance. Someone pointed out to me that, in the Old Testament, there was an allowance for, you could divorce, or there was allowance for polygamy because there wasn't the grace there. And it wasn't what God's plan was, but he allowed because of human weakness. So this is kind of similar in the New Testament. They allow this weakness and this permission, but it is not what God wants. He wants grace and he wants continence, not indulgence all the time or indulgence ever. He doesn't want it, but if it's there for you if you need it, okay? I permit the act of copulation by way of indulgence. What does that mean? That's what it says in 1 Corinthians 7:6. The Bible uses a lot of economy of words, a lot. They say a few things, and you need these Bible scholars to point this stuff out. This is what always has been known. This is why people. Oh, I should. There's a Bible commentary, or there's the 700 Club. They speak about it. Let me show you that video in a second. All right. Whoever that old guy is for 700 Club, I'll think Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson is the same as Timothy Gordon because they say it's just like eating. All right. The conjugal act. I might even do a separate video on that. Okay. I do not prescribe it. Nay, St. Augustine takes it. I say this by way of pardon. We just read St. Augustine. The Greek word denotes forgiveness, and hence St. Augustine gathers that it is venial sin to have sexual connection, not for the sake of children, but for carnal pleasure. Totally, ding, 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 100% correct. This is why menopause is out. Nature's trying to let you know that, okay? and to avoid the temptations of Satan, for pardon is given to what is sinful. So too, indulgence is given in what concerns sin, or at all events, a lesser good, as St. Thomas has rightly observed. So we got Augustine, Aquinas, and a Lapide all saying the same thing. That's what 1 Corinthians 7:6 means. It's by way of indulgence, but that's not the command. That's not the way to use the marital act. But we're going to allow it in case you're not quite holy enough to just go continent as needed. That there is no precept given here is also evident. What does that mean? Okay, Christian Wagner, pay attention, my man. You're Mr. Precept, okay? Not heat miser, not snow miser, but you're Mr. Precept. Now, you keep saying that the increase and multiply is a precept. It is no longer a binding precept. That's Old Testament news. There is no precept given here, also evident, because the apostle permits married people to contain for a time. Yeah, you don't have to have kids. There ain't nothing. You don't have to do any of that stuff. In fact, the more Josephite marriage you can be, the better. All right? But God set it up in such a way that doesn't happen too often. That they may give themselves to fasting and prayer. Therefore, if they agree to devote their whole life to fasting and prayer, he permits them to contain themselves for life. Yeah, that's right. So if you're a stud muffin, you're holy, you want to pray, you want to get ready for heaven, you want to serve God, you can be continent in marriage. But if you want you want family procreate, sure, go for it, But the point is that with the NFP, new paganism, all this is out the window, and all we're doing is trying to give ourselves more holiness by doing the conjugal act more. It's crazy. Okay. And then we'll get back to Timothy Gordon in a minute. English. Okay, Casti Canubi. The secondary ends. You can pursue the secondary ends, which is what they're talking about in 1 Corinthians 7:6. You can pursue those, all right, as long as they are subordinated to the primary end. Number one, they have to be subordinated to the primary end. So if you're doing it as a remedy of concupiscence, you're not subordinating it to the primary end. So it's sinful, venial sinful. And so long as the intrinsic nature of the act is preserved. So those are two things you need. You have to have intention, and you have to have intrinsic nature. Timothy Gordon says, as long as you have the intrinsic nature, it doesn't matter what your intention is. Just let nature do it. No, Tim. You got to be trying to get pregnant. That's what you got to be if you want to be free from sin. That's Aquinas. That's in the Bible. Now, here's the Latin translation of Casti 59, okay? So the secondary ends, you can in marriage itself, marriage itself, nature, the natural, the intrinsic nature, and the use, and in the use of the conjugal law. What was that phrase we just heard? Conjugal law. What is conjugal law, Timothy? It's the order, okay? Otherwise we have the perversion of the right order, Tim, which you say doesn't exist. You know what I mean? All days of the month, doesn't matter what you're trying to do, or you have to have the conjugal law is not just the nature, it is the order, procreation first. If you're having a hard time and you just need to relieve some concupiscence, you can indulge in that, but it is a pardonable sin. Okay, that means it's a venial sin. Like during menses, she's not allowed to ask for the debt because she's supposed to be aware. But if the guy just can't keep it together, it's a venial sin at that time. All right. Oh, here we go. Yeah, the marriage act will always be evil unless it is excused by the aforesaid goods, and those goods are you're either honoring the debt from the one who's trying to get pregnant, or you're both trying to get pregnant. Those are the goods. Leave open the generative powers equals no steering away from them deliberately. Let me think about that for a second. Yeah, it's just plain English. That's what it means. So if leaving open, that's what open to life does not mean this. When you say leave open the generative powers, that means don't mess with the generative powers. Family planning says we're going to plan those generative powers. So when Aquinas says leaving open the generative powers, that's what he means. You can't plan them or govern them. Reply to objection 3. The excess of passion that amounts to a sin does not refer to the passion's quantitative intensity, but to its proportion to reason. Wherefore, it is only when a passion goes beyond the bounds of reason that it is reckoned to be immoderate. What does that mean? That means that it's not reasonable to use the conjugal act for secondary ends, because that's not what nature has it for, okay? Not reasonable. So you are immoderate. You're outside the bounds of marriage, even though Tim, you have the conjugal act perfectly fine as far as the intrinsic nature of the act. You are no longer using it reasonably because you're Christopher Westing the thing, okay? You're doing it as an indulgence. 1 Corinthians 7:6. Sinful. Venial sinful. Aquinas says this up, down, sideways. Okay. Humanae Vitae 14 condemned is any action to prevent procreation as an end. That's right. So Humanae Vitae contradicts itself. It's unfortunate, but it's confusing because they do get it right. It's good. Condemned. You cannot have any action to prevent procreation. You can't do it. That's what family planning is. All right, let's get back to this video.
But I mean, as long as you both want to have it, yes, there will be pleasure, but there's a good to the end because it's a noble end. It's always going to make you closer together. So, more unity alert. It's always going to get you closer together. That's a noble end. Sorry, it's not. Not for the conjugal act, it's not. That's not what it's for. You can't use it for that end primarily, okay? Oh, people get retarded when it comes to sex.
It's not that we're retarded, Tim. It's that we know what Christian marriage is, and we read the saints, and we read everything that came before. Dietrich von Hildebrand. All right, everything that came before the birth control stuff. All that's going on, Tim, is they've taken the code of marriage, the code of ends, and they flipped it and given you Catholic contraception, okay? And no one can let go of it because once you let that out of the bag, everyone says, "Where's mine?" And now you have to say, "Oh no, this is why the stuff I'm talking about is such a super hard sell." But it's true.
Yeah, I'm not theology of the body. I'm not NFP. I guess I'm slightly closer to them. I'm kind of a geometric mean between them and the people that say it's wrong to have sex with your wife. Just really weird.
Well, Tim, if you think that's so weird, maybe you could stop blocking and talk about it a little bit with me, on Twitter. That'd be cool, huh?
Connor said, just want to say, hey, Tim and Steph, also to the Mexican guys sitting in your studio right now. Andrew, pray for my pregnant wife and my child in their holiness and safety.
Oh, who's that?
Well, this is Connor Patrick.
What's up, Connor? Yeah, we'll pray for you. Yeah. He left the studio a second ago.
Make a call. Some of his Mexican relatives, I think. Carrie is give some hearts. Thank you so much. And be the patriarch. He said the golden mean.
The golden mean usually is always a geometric mean. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's what I got with it. Look, some stuff's hard. This is not, no pun intended. This is not hard. This is a simple thing, and it needs to be simple because the normies out there are obsessed with sex, and this is kind of what they live for.
Yeah. When you start saying that it's not for procreation, it takes on a life of its own, just like homos. Okay. That's all they think about. Well, when you say NFP is nature, then all anyone's going to think about is how can I get me some nature? Because that's what it's for. You've just cloaked the paganism of pursuit of flesh with Catholic sprinkles and calling it all this unity stuff. And then it's like, whoa, look, in Genesis it says we need unity. We have to go to the saints. There's nothing we can talk about with St. Thomas Aquinas that would shore up what you're saying, Tim. You've got half the equation. It's not just the intrinsic nature, Timothy. It's the order also, and you've got no order.
And so they need basic rules of thumb. And I think what I was going to tell Christian, that I'll tell him next time, is like, what you're doing is counterproductive, because it's like making people think that there's like, I'm really hungry, I need to go get a bite to eat. I'm not just saying this is a thought experiment.
You're actually
I need to go. I'm hungry. It's like you're making them needlessly double down and be like, well, am I getting a bite to eat because it'll feel good to eat, or because my organs need nutrition? It's like, but it's an inseparable purpose.
All right, so we're gonna pause. We're gonna dive into this a little bit, because he's just using the food analogy. He's like, hey, if you're hungry and you want to eat, you feel like you got to eat. It's inseparable from nutrition. So the conjugal act is the same thing. You're always open to life. What is the problem? Let's check our notes. Hold on. Eating is always oriented toward nutrition primarily, unless digestion is deliberately bypassed. Yeah, so it's just automatic. That's right. You cannot separate the two things. However, marital relations are always oriented toward offspring primarily, unless fertility is deliberately bypassed. So there's the difference right there. You are trying to not get pregnant, so you are separating procreation from the act. That's what you cannot do. Yes, nutrition can be separated from satiating hunger. Procreation can be separated from the secondary ends. All right, so let's go back and listen to Tim, see what he's got here.
So it's always good, right? Your metabolic system's just like your reproductive system, and it feels good to eat. And if you eat too much, it's gluttony, and if you have sex in the wrong ways, it's some sort of porneia. But if you're doing it in the right ways at the right time, you don't have to sit there and think, oh, well, am I doing this 97% for my organs getting nourished and 3% for the pleasure, or is it 96.4? I'm like, there's no way to even know. So I think his approach does more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what Aquinas was saying as far as percentages goes. Where he said, where is it? Right here. The excess of passion that amounts to sin does not refer to the passion's quantitative intensity, but to its proportion to reason. So it's not how much pleasure do you feel versus how much procreation. It's what are you doing it for? Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's go back to this. Go ahead, Tim.
And people out there aren't studied in moral philosophy anyway. So, yeah.
Be the Patriarch, he said, sorry for the endless comments, but while I have you, your ear, just want to say I really appreciate you and all Taylor Marshall. You called me to refer to traditionalism several years back.
Thanks.
And just really appreciate you guys. It's very kind.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, awesome. Yeah, good job. Hopefully the show will be helpful to a lot of people and widely viewed and all that. And just remember, Fiat Canube, Humani Vitae, Familius Consortio, Catechism of Trent, Gaudium et Spes, and the new Catholic Catechism, 6 documents.
All of those things he mentioned, half of them say what I'm saying and half of them say what Tim is saying. All right. Because after 1965, the legal poetry of marriage worked its way into the legal room somehow, and it's sitting there, and that's where people get all this theology of the body stuff applied in law. Well, I kept saying there's no hermeneutic of continuity on this. Okay, that's why you could say Tim is embarrassing himself, because he those papers he has, he doesn't show the receipts.
Documents at least all say what I'm saying, that it's this simple.
No.
There are first millennium theologians that were not magisterialized, but major ones that really talk about sex in this weird way. And
that's because they all knew that procreation was primary. That those words have a meaning that you can't, Tim, you've eliminated any sort of primary secondary. You've eliminated it. That's why the old guys seem weird. Okay.
And the church really did ignore those, even if it's guys like Augustine at times. Or
the church didn't. That was the church. The church didn't ignore that. It's called procreation primary. That's all it is. No, the church didn't ignore the weird thing. That's what it was, man.
Or St. Alphonsus Liguori, like you listen to him and it's like, oh, you can't enjoy it with your wife. You got to bag your wife's head. You're not allowed to. There's just some weird sort of ancient, maybe fall of the Roman Empire conceptions that were never magisterialized. Now,
it's all 1 Corinthians 7:6. That's all that boils down to. You got to check that out, Tim. If Satan tempts you by way of indulgence will allow the conjugal act, then that is what's going on. It's the pardonable sin because you're not pursuing procreation with it. All right. That's all this bag over your head stuff. Don't enjoy it. All this weird things that you're talking about, those are mischaracterizations, I suppose. The saints don't say that stuff. They explain what it's for.
when liberals or modernists say this about something, they'll say something that was magisterialized. Well, now we have a historical context. The church never magisterialized these private theological opinions. That's the difference. That's why
the magisterialization or the magisterium is procreation primary. It can't change. That just doesn't mean, well, we think it's the most important. No, that means legal and nature. The primary purpose is independent. Timothy, you are saying the primary purpose is dependent on the secondary purpose and vice versa. In other words, there is no primary purpose. There's just the act, and whatever happens, happens. You've destroyed the code of marriage. It's called the new paganism. What do pagans want? They want a lot of things. One of the things they want is conjugal act anytime, anywhere, however they want to do it, for whatever reason. That's what they want. It's all condemned.
It's not modernist to say this. The church really only magisterialized this stuff lately, as in Humanae Vitae.
Okay. What the church did lately was promulgate cover for NFP. And they didn't, they used plausible deniability, the vagueness that they use in Humanae Vitae and also in the new code of canon law. It's a lot of wordsmithing to be very careful that they say you can't contracept, and at the same time the way it's couched in the exact phrases, and they are, like I've said this before, they speak of significances, they don't speak of purposes. Okay, so they're not, but everyone just takes that as purpose, stuff like that.
Really where it was, and it was all part. What do you think? The last thought here: why did the church magisterialize the teachings on the papacy so late? I don't know, but it only did so after about 1900 years at Vatican I. You could argue that's strange that it waited so long, but it's good because they got.
I guess I don't know, man. But the Pope's always been infallible or whatever, and everyone kind of knew it. And then because it was challenged, they just doubled down on it, I guess, but everyone knew it. And same thing with marriage, though, but everyone knew procreation primary, but now we have got this wrench thrown into it in 1951, where you're saying it's natural to use the conjugal act to not get pregnant. And that's nature. Now, what are we going to do? We have to overturn our marital code, the law.
All the bad ideas out. Why did the church wait till the Lambeth Conference in 1930 to start magisterializing it? Casti Connubii, then Humanae Vitae, 1930, 1968, to get all the bad ideas out.
Well, they did have to respond, but it was everything that was in, a lot of stuff that was in Casti Connubii was already in Arcanum from 1880, whatever. As in, Casti borrowed from Arcanum a lot of it, and then they said, hey, you cannot circumscribe the increase and multiply. You can't do it. And that's anytime you are manipulating the act or you're manipulating the timing so as to circumscribe the outcome, you're violating the nature of it.
So I think that I'm going to leave Christian a voice text and say these two things. The metabolic analogy, I think he's really admonishing people to, if you're hungry, go get something to eat.
I got to show you guys something real quick.
It was always
all right. So here's Pat Robertson, 700 Club.
Production, not pleasure.
is this true?
Well, of course it's not true. You know, sex is important. I mean, is eating for pleasure or for keeping
All right, so
you
it's
alive?
they go on and on about that. It's pretty funny. I'm going to do a special video all about eating versus the conjugal act and how all these Protestants are like Timothy Gordon. Okay, they've left the building on this with their NFP. All right, back to the show. Hold on.
Don't get something to eat. You know, maybe it's sinful. It's like, well, if you're hungry, you need to eat. And because it's an inseparable purpose, the sort of pleasure of eating with the good of your organs, you can't separate it. The only time it becomes sinful to eat is if you're eating way after you already ate. And then also the point about the intentional late hour magisterialization of the church's teaching on sex being like the late magisterialization of the teaching on the papacy. All right, so God bless. Peace.
Couple small comments on this. The conjugal act is just like eating situation. No, it's not. You can manipulate. You cannot separate nutrition from eating, of course. So it's impossible to do that. However, unless you manipulate the act, you can separate procreation from the conjugal act by manipulating the way it's done, be it timing or otherwise. That's a huge difference right there. The other thing is, I think it's in Tobit, they'll say people shut out God from their minds and pursue, the horse and mule. They pursue the flesh. This is why we also must be thinking about we want to get pregnant, because that is where God is. We're pursuing God through the act when we're trying to get pregnant. When we're trying to do other things, that's shutting God out. That's why it's a venial sin to not trying to get pregnant, and it's a mortal sin to use the act to not achieve pregnancy through manipulating either the timing or whatever. The reason why the food analogy never works is because digestion is constant, but the conjugal, the fertility cycle is not constant. So the analogy fails. We're going to go to Christian Wagner, all right, and see what he's got to. All right, so we got Christian Wagner, Eamon, who's Mr. NFP, did that little NFP, but Eamon doesn't answer questions anymore, unfortunately. And then some guy named Hassan, who seems pretty cool. They made some decent points, and then we're going to finish off this video. So take it away, Christian Wagner. This again, I think this is from some of his older stuff that he quote unquote isn't proud of anymore, or it's not quite jamming with the NFP vibe he has trying to adopt of late.
So St. Thomas says, here is where, if you're in a state of grace, here is where the marital act can actually be meritorious. So he says, sometimes, however, it may be a venial sin, sometimes a mortal sin. What is had with the intention of bringing forth offspring, then it is meritorious.
Okay, so do you see that? Sometimes it can be a venial sin or a mortal sin, which is exactly what I've been saying. Christian Wagner is totally right, man. He's just got it. It's Aquinas. You're not thinking procreation, it's venial. If you are blocking in some way through the calendar or otherwise, it's mortal.
What's important here is he's saying the intention to procreate children. Now, the procreative intention doesn't necessarily restrict itself to a lot of people. When they hear procreation, they think, okay, making babies. That's not necessarily what procreation means in Catholic theology. It's actually a lot broader than that. You can't just like make babies and say, okay, I did my.
If the procreation
child.
educate,
no, it also involves the education and raising of those.
That's
children.
right. Yeah.
So when it comes to the so-called unitive aspect, the unitive is contained under the procreative.
No, it's not. That makes zero sense. He's just trying to. He's trying to keep NFP and Aquinas in the same ballpark or something, in the same universe. It's impossible. There's no such thing as unity underneath procreation, and it's a unitive aspect. No. It's unity, or what? It's secondary, but it's not under the procreative aspect. It's not. I shouldn't say it. There's no such thing as unity as far as law is concerned with the conjugal act. Doesn't exist. You okay? Let's keep going.
So for St. Thomas, the first way is procreation, which could either be, and he says it's an act of religion, actually, because you're bringing forth children for the worship with the intention of the worship of God.
Exactly right, which is why I say you need to be thinking about babies or trying to get pregnant, having it in your mind, because it's an act of worship. This is what God intends. This is the reason, all right? And if you use it think Adam and Eve before the fall. They needed to procreate, but it was going to happen non-carnally. That was the plan, okay? But now sin enters, so it's carnal. So you got to be careful with this act. It's fornication unless justified through procreation. And there's an allowance for concupiscence, but it's sin. Venial sin.
So you're trying to expand the kingdom of God. So this is an act of religion. And under that
if
aspect,
you're not, then it's venial sin. If you don't at least have the habitual intention to raise your children to be saints, to worship.
No, if you you have to have habitual intention to procreate. So look what Eamon just said. He's Mr. NFP. So this is what they do. They make it sound super quiet. He says you have to have the habitual intention to educate your kids Catholic. No, you have to always have that intention. Always. But you have to have at least the habitual intention to procreate, or it's venial sin. He really snuck that one in there. He doesn't have let's rewind him a little bit. Go ahead.
Is procreation, which could either be, and he says it's an act of religion, actually, because you're bringing forth children for the worship with the intention of the worship of God. So you're trying to expand the kingdom of God. So this is an act of religion. And under that
if
aspect,
you're not, then it's venial sin. If you don't at least have the habitual intention to raise your children to be saints, to worship God, then you're doing something immoral. Even if you're trying to procreate, it always has to be referred to the worship of God. That's actually really critical.
Like I said, he completely goofed that up. You no. I could even show you where Aquinas says it. You've got to be either trying to get pregnant or at least the habit of trying to get pregnant. Okay, it doesn't have to be in your brain every time, as long as that's your habit. If you're trying to not, or you don't want to get pregnant, you can't be thinking those thoughts. That's the point. So he just says no. You have to have at least or it's a venial sin if you don't want to raise your kids. No, it's a violation of the marriage contract. I would say that's grave sin if you are. I'm not going to raise my kids Catholic, or I don't want. No, I don't know. I mean, you gotta you have to agree to raise your kids Catholic, and there's no exceptions, of course. I don't know if it has to be in your brain when the baby's being made, but you have to agree to that. So he just totally missed the point. He misrepresented it completely. Enough said. Any problems? By the way, if you come along this far, please click like. We need some likes. That helps. And then tell me what you think in the comments, of course. And I'll back up I'll give you more receipts if you want, because I can't make a 5-hour video every time. It's too much. There's way too many receipts to keep going through. I just have to kind of blow through it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. No.
All right, so that's good. Let's go to the next section, 8-37. Hang on a second. Okay, they're going to talk about unity a little bit more.
Also coming under that fourth one.
Okay, let's see.
Okay, so this is second one is from his commentary on 1 Corinthians 7. He says, hence it should be noted that the conjugal act is sometimes meritorious and without any mortal venial sin, as when it is directed to the good of procreation and education of a child for the worship of God. And notice, he actually does specifically explain here that it's procreation and including the education of a child for the worship of God.
Right, duh, yeah.
So that would include the unitive aspect.
Whoa, no! Procreation and education, that's one good, okay? It doesn't include the unitive aspect. The unitive aspect is an add-on, new paganism, reverse the order, created by the imposition of legalized NFP, making NFP natural. That's all it is. Christian Wagner, you and your unity are modernist because it's like this unity entered the room, and now we have to do something with it. And Aquinas is looking at the unity like, what are you talking about? Those are secondary ends. They are not to be pursued primarily. And now you're saying that, what did he just say? He said procreation and education of children is where the unity comes in. What? No, it doesn't. No. Education of children. You can have zero unity and procreate and educate with zero unity, because unity is some subjective feeling of good. You can raise your kids Catholic, you can procreate. It wouldn't be a lot of fun. It might not be good, but it would be legal. It would be by the book. It would be according to, it would pass muster with Aquinas, although there may be a lack of charity, but you don't have to have that, is the point. When you start saying unity / charity / good / mutual consent, all that is required, you have now created a new hierarchy of ends, a new order, a new marriage code, a new paganism. What do we want? The conjugal act. When do we want it? Now. What time? Whenever we want it. That's all that's going on, and now you've created the people who just there's the what do you call it? Horse and mule, man. That's what they want.
But then it is an act of religion, or when it is.
I want to read why
performed
that
the
just
sake
for
of
fun.
rendering
Hang on.
debt is
Someone else. That's actually something that they talk about, is to use your spouse to fantasize about another person. That would be also coming under that fourth one.
Okay, so this is second one is from his commentary on 1 Corinthians 7. He says, hence it should be noted that the conjugal act is sometimes meritorious and without any mortal venial sin, as when it is directed to the good of procreation and education of a child for the worship of God. And notice, he actually does specifically explain here that it's procreation and including the education of a child for the worship of God. Yeah. So that would include the unitive aspect.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't say anything about the unitive aspect in here. And an aspect is not a purpose anyway. When one is excited matrimonial concupiscence, the nevertheless stays within the limits of marriage, namely that he be content with his wife only. Okay, yeah, that's right. But sometimes it's performed with mortal sins when so he's explaining that sometimes it is accompanied with venial sin, namely when one is excited to the matrimonial act by concupiscence. Venial sin. You're not trying to get pregnant. You're doing venial. So what they call unity is venial sin. It says it right here. I'm looking at it right here. Like right there, man. You can't see it on my mouse. But anyway. Yeah, if it is... Okay. But sometimes it is accompanied with venial sin when it is excited by concupiscence. Even if it's within the bounds of marriage but sometimes it is performed with mortal sin when concupiscence is carried beyond the limits of marriage. For example, when the husband approaches the wife with the idea that she would. Okay, so if you're trying not to get pregnant, that's what that means.
But then it is an act of religion, or when it is performed for the sake of rendering the debt. It is an act of justice. But every virtuous act is meritorious if it is performed with charity. But sometimes it is accompanied with venial sin, namely when one is excited to the matrimonial act by concupiscence, which nevertheless stays within the limits of the marriage, namely that he is content with his wife only. But sometimes is performed with mortal sin, as when concupiscence is carried beyond the limits of marriage. For example, when the husband approaches his wife with the idea that he would just as gladly or more gladly approach another woman.
So that's another way of saying if you are not trying to get pregnant, you're using your wife as a prostitute, meaning another woman, okay? That's what that means. This is why contraception is mortal sin, because you're using your wife as a prostitute. You are not trying to get pregnant, which is what happens with a prostitute, right? Okay. That's what that means.
And then another instance is found in his commentary on 1 Thessalonians. I just wanted to show the consistency here. In sanctification and honor, because this is the proper use of marriage, since it is for the good of the offspring or for fulfilling an obligation. And so marriage may be with...
Yep, for the good of the offspring or fulfilling an obligation. So the agent has to be trying for offspring, and the obligation of the contractee, the other spouse, for the marital debt. That's what that is.
Without sin. And the fulfilling of an obligation, that is the, I don't know why they translate in so many different ways. This is just the rendering of the debt over here. And so marriage may be without sin, but sometimes a venial sin is involved if concupiscence is not exercised beyond the limits of marriage. That is when, although having concupiscence, a person does not indulge in it except with his own wife. But when this takes place outside the bonds of marriage, the action becomes a mortal sin. And this happens when he would perform the action even if she were not his wife, and more willingly with another woman. Then he quotes Hebrews 13.
Yeah, duh. Okay, got it.
And then the section from De Malo, which is his best section on this, personally. Crap. Are you going to mess with me? Okay. Oh, I accidentally messed up. Okay, there you go. So, therefore, when there is a sin of sexual lust only because of the disorder of the desire, for example, when one has intercourse with one's wife lustfully, we need to make a distinction. We need to make the distinction between, because the disorder is sometimes such as to exclude the ordination of one's ultimate end. For example, such is the case when a man desires sexual pleasure to such a degree that he would not abstain from it because of God's precept and would will to have intercourse with his wife, or even another woman, contrary to the law of marriage. And then also it is important to note, he would will to have intercourse with his wife contrary to the law of marriage. This is talking about the intention to perform illicit acts with one's own wife. And then there is a mortal sin, since the desire for sex is not kept within the bounds of marriage. And the disorder of the desire sometimes does not eliminate the ordination of the ultimate end, namely when a man, although excessively desiring sexual pleasure, would abstain from it because he would act contrary to God's precept, and he would not have intercourse with any woman unless she was his wife. And then the desire stays within the bounds of marriage, and such is a venial sin.
Yep, you're not thinking about pregnancy.
And then there's, in the response to the seventh objection in De Veritate, question 25, article 5. Let me pull that up real quick. Again, when a man approaches his wife from concupiscence, there's a venial sin, provided that he does not exceed the bounds of wedded life.
Okay, that's menopause right there. That's during pregnancy right there. He doesn't do it outside, but when he's interested, not in pregnancy.
It is accordingly clear that the very moment of concupiscence preceding reason in a married person is a venial sin.
Preceding reason in married is a venial sin. It says female, but they mean venial sin, because it's reasonable to do so for pregnancy, but it's not reasonable to do so for another reason because of nature. You know, it's like, yeah, you can hold your umbrella when it's not raining, but there's no reason to do it. That's what they're talking about. Except this is nature, so we can't mess with it.
But when reason determines what one may illicitly crave, then even though sensuality goes out of it, there will be no sin. And then lastly, this is from the Supplementum, because if you remember, St. Thomas actually never finished the Summa, unfortunately. So they had to supplement the third part of the Summa with some of his writings from his census commentaries. This is him writing as actually a very young man. So consequently, the right answer to this question is that if pleasure be sought in such a way as to exclude the honesty of marriage, so that, for example, someone should not turn to his wife because she's his wife, but only because she's a woman, prepared to do the same with her if she was not his wife, there's a mortal sin, because such a man is said to be too ardent a lover of his wife.
Yeah, when they say, as I said, when they start saying if you're treating your wife like she's not your wife, that's another way of saying we're avoiding pregnancy. That's why it's a mortal sin.
Because his ardor carries him away from the goods of marriage. If, however, he seeks pleasure within the bounds of marriage, so that it would not be sought in another woman, it is a venial sin. And then the reply to the objection one, I think this kind of sums it up well. A man seeks a heart.
All right, I think that's it. Seeks. We don't need to seek the harlot. We've already heard about that. Let's go to the next section. Just a minute. Okay, so we're going to listen to this guy named Hassan. He's pretty cool. He's on the video, and he's sort of saying what I've been saying most recently, that the default for marriage is continence because we're called to celibacy and to be control of our lower desires. But again, once you legalize NFP, you have to say the new default is love, which is horse and mule, etc., etc. This is why this is why NFP is like got its built-in way of not allowing itself to be overturned, because everyone is now interested in it because of what it affords the conjugal act, and it changes from the classic Catholic Christian orientation, which is it's for procreation is the only way to excuse it, and the default, like I said, should be continence, should be chastity, not trying to use the conjugal act all the time to get holy, according to Father Mike Schmitz. All right, take it away, Hassan.
Spiritual Life by St. Thomas. I think that there's a really beautiful section here where he draws from St. Augustine, commenting on Abraham and his state, which proves how we don't have to look at it this way, where Abraham has the habit of celibate continency, but he has the act of marital continence. Without getting into the differentiation between chastity and continence, which I think is a big problem. That's something else most people nowadays don't know. Marital continence is something which points towards celibate continence in the life of grace.
Great statement. Marital continence points towards celibate continence in the life of grace. Okay, that's a great point.
You can think of it in this way. We're all called to celibacy, but some of us are called directly to celibacy, and some of us are called to celibacy through marriage.
How are you called to celibacy through marriage? Okay, the answer is you use that conjugal act to get pregnant. That's how. Different kind of gig, but that's how. So you got from age 16 to 50. There's your window. Do what you're going to do, and do it for pregnancy. But marriage is not this theology of the body fun fest that everyone seems to be making it to be. Okay, and then you got to get your hormone replacement therapy after menopause, which can give you cancer, and keep it all going and on and on. Nope. Kind of makes the priesthood look a little better there, doesn't it, guys? All right.
Because the universal call to holiness is a call to what? To beatitude in heaven, where you will be celibate. So either you're going to be celibate then, or you're going to be celibate immediately. And if you're not going to be celibate immediately, at least in some way, you're called to celibacy at some point in your life, provided that you don't die.
And what the NFP people are saying is, oh, look, all this is good. So yeah, that's how you're called to celibacy when when it's naturally time to have a baby, you just like mark it off on the calendar and suck it up or whatever. And now she's going nuts and you're going nuts and there's no kids. Okay. And you don't have to trust in God that much that way, right? That's the kind of celibacy that NFP continence that NFP promotes. It's not the right kind, because it's not honest, because you're just using the conjugal act to not get pregnant later. So it's dishonest continence. It's not the good kind. But anyway, this because NFP likes to say, oh, it's a kind of asceticism, and the asceticism that is needed is no action, no conjugal activity when pregnancy is not in view. There's your asceticism right there. There's your continence right there. Okay? So start thinking about heaven. Start thinking about the default, which is continence, and have 17 kids if that's what it takes, man. That's how we recover.
Before your spouse, right? So there is one metric for perfection. We don't have two fathers. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. It's one Father. We don't have two different extremes. We don't have two different pinnacles of the Christian life. We have one. I think that's really what's missing in the current perception. And this is why when you talk to people and you hear things like, well, that's for priests, well, that's for nuns, well, that's for monks, it kind of misses the point, right?
Gary Goo has an interesting section on this in his fantastic work on the 3 ages of the spiritual life and 3 ages of the interior life. But he calls this like a naturalistic spirituality, which basically views the life of the non-religious, so the life of the laity, as only kind of like tending in a sort of lesser end, which is basically like you're kind of like a good person. It's like this whole idea of a good person. The good person doesn't do bad things like out in the open. They pay their taxes. They don't cheat on their wives. They sit down and read bedtime stories with their kids. They don't like cheat at business. This is the nice person sort of view of Christianity. But Christianity, of course, all those things are very good things, and you should be doing all of those things. But there's a further call that goes up and beyond this. You see this throughout the Gospels, and you see this throughout St. Paul's epistles as well, where we are called not only to like a good natural life, we're called to live the angelic life. St. Thomas is called the angelic doctor because by his chastity he was able to submit all of his faculties to his intellect. So as like St. Robert Bellarmine describes this, there's almost the reason we are said to have spiritual bodies is because basically our bodies, spiritual bodies in beatitude after the resurrection of the body, is basically because our bodies become completely subject to our intellects, and therefore they are given a share in supernatural glory, and our members become glorious. So that's why those who are married are called to live as if they are those who have wives be as they have none. What is that supposed to mean, guys? Those who have wives be as they have none. If this doesn't mean the fact that we are called to tend towards perfection, which will all
Yes. Live as though you don't have wives, and wives live as though you don't have husbands. What does that mean? That throws a wrench into NFP, theology of the body, big time. Because, like I keep saying, and everyone, Ascension Press and all those nice people out there, Lila Rose, the more conjugal acts you do, the holier you get. So how are we? And the more unity you got to cultivate. Unity. You know what I mean? Closer to the heart, baby. How are we going to do that if we're supposed to act like we don't have husbands or act like we don't have wives? What are they? So it's we're taking the Christian paradigm of order in the conjugal act, and we're trashing it. This is the new paganism where it's all about the conjugal act. So yeah, I'm curious what he has to finish this, because all these guys, at least I don't know about Hassan, but I know that Eamon, who keeps looking sideways up there with the green shirt, and Christian Wagner, they're kind of on the NFP bandwagon here, so to a degree. So and they're trying to thread the needle with Thomism and NFP, and it's not going to work. But let's see what they have to say.
ultimately be ours in the life of glory. And I think the biggest issue that a lot of people have with this is the whole like, oh, I honestly, anybody who there's somebody who is trying to bring, I just have to mute anybody who says this, because no matter how much explanation that's going to come into this, it's just not going to help. It's like, oh, if I can like enjoy a good wine, or if I can enjoy a steak, why can't I enjoy the marital use as much as?
He's saying exactly what Pat Robertson from 700 Club and what Timothy Gordon has been saying. If I can enjoy food, why can't I enjoy the conjugal act? What's the problem? It's all good, right? Let's just see what he says, because Christian Wagner is now saying, no, that's not cool. Like I said, Christian Wagner, I think, has had some paradigm shifts going here. He's trying to get in the NFP club, but he's got this baggage, this Catholicism from these older videos sitting here.
As I want. And is it a sin for me to eat good food? Well, you're lacking a fundamental distinction in Catholic moral theology between sin and imperfection.
Okay, so he never answered the question. He goes on and on and on with all this other stuff, and he never answers the question. I listened to this. So it's crazy. As I said, I'm going to do a separate video about 700 Club, Timothy Gordon, and why eating and nutrition are not the same as conjugal act and procreation. these analogies have got to stop, and it's perpetuating the problem. Anyway, he totally punted. If we'll push play a little more, and I'll show you. He just never answers it.
Is for like later today. I'm probably gonna be driving. When I drive, I actually like to
see. Now he's just going and talking about this and that, 5 other things. He never gets to the point.
He's not eating steak and drinking wine.
Yeah,
you can't. Okay. So anyway, all right, you guys. Remember, if you're not against NFP, you're not on the team. So go out there and stay toxic.
It's not in the way you look or the